Tonight we have an unbelievable story on Patriot Nation Radio Live on the World Integrity News Network. It involves an international child trafficking and pedophile ring that is exposed tonight by a victim who has come forward. You will not believe your ears when you hear how deep this story runs from Australian prime ministers, clergymen, actors, politicians, and the president. Here our guest tonight, Fiona Barnett, tell her story of horrific crimes against her and others who have now come forward because of her bravery. It's very incredible what's happening. This stretches around the globe, ladies and gentlemen. This trafficking of children. It's not only children, it's women for prostitution. It's all kinds of things. Mules for the drug trade. We're going to make you carry our drugs across the border. And if you don't do it, we're going to kill your children. Stuff like that. This is what's happening across this country, across this planet. As our guest tonight is from Australia. She comes from down under. You know, the home of Steve Irwin and AC/DC. Crazy things that you would never expect to come out of Australia. You see the outback, and we marvel at the beauty, the wildlife, and the koala bears, and the things that are there, and the beauty of Australia. But the evil underbelly of the government, the judicial system, judges, police officers, and like I said, prime ministers, actors, politicians, clergymen, and a president. We're going to bring our guest in real quick, and we'll get this show started. Fiona, how you doing tonight? Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm doing quite well, thanks. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. I think it's very important to get this story out. People will be shocked, I think, by the end of this show as to some of the things that you're going to reveal as we move along through this show. Real fast, just give a quick introduction as to who Fiona Barnett is. Philip?
Basically, I'm 46 years of age. I live in the Tweed Heads area, which is near the Gold Coast, and in the state of New South Wales, right up the top near Queensland on the ocean east coast. And I've got 2 kids. I'm married, and I've done quite a bit of study in psychology, and I'm doing a little bit of law at the moment, and various different things in my background. But I was raised in Sydney for for all of my primary school, and I moved up this way during high school. And Sydney is a good plane flight south of where I am. So I managed to get out of the ring that abused me down there. And I basically was raised in introduced to the international child sex trafficking ring through my grandparents. So we had my grandmother and my step-grandfather, so that was Helen and Peter Holozak. And they were Nazis. They were Nazi war criminals who liked to work in the death camps and the Gestapo, etc., over in Poland and Lithuania. And they immigrated to Australia, and what people don't realise is that Australia received a very large number of Nazi war criminals. And there's an author called Mark Aaron who wrote all about that, and various articles in newspapers. So that's where it all started. And that's me, basically.
So your own family introduced you to the child trafficking and the pedophile ring.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Well, there's a structure that people aren't so familiar with concerning this pedophile ring network. There are different types of victims. Some victims are kidnapped off the streets. Other victims are bred by what we call breeders, and they're children whose births are not registered, and they're bred just for child sex trafficking. And but there's another category, and that's what I belong to, and they're children who are born into it. So it's multi-generational abuse. And if someone like me who's born into it, we are expected to go on and sort of become administrators within the pedophile ring network system. We're expected to become perpetrators, and so we are trained up for those roles. So I was privy to the organisational side of the network. So I sat in on meetings from a young age because they were training me to participate in those meetings when I was an adult.
Right. And how old were you when you were first introduced into this crazy world of child trafficking and child sex ring?
I was born into it, so it's my earliest memory. So my earliest memories of visiting my doting grandparents at Engadine, and so my first memories I have, memories back to when I must have been about not even 2, and I have memories around that age of being abused by Peter Holozak, my step-grandfather, and just flashes of memories when I'm very young. And then my memories for age 3, I had a flashback, a very vivid flashback to age 3 and being abused by Dr. Anthony Kidman, who is movie star Nicole Kidman's father. And then probably the clearest memories of all start around age 5 to 6. That's when, I've got some very clear memories from those ages.
Now, I was checking out your page and stuff when I was first researching the story, and you had just mentioned Nicole Kidman's father. Did I see where you were in a room and Nicole Kidman was there watching as you got abused?
Absolutely. Nicole Kidman is a victim of this same ring. She was raised in it. She was present when Anthony Kidman committed a murder at Sydney University. They flayed a 5-year-old boy. I was 9, so Nicole would have been about 11 because she's a couple of years older than me. Another clear memory I have is when I was sexually assaulted by Anthony Kidman at his house on the north side of Sydney, and it was at a big party attended. It was for a post-production Shakespearean production run by John Bell, who's the other person who raped me at that party. And I came into that party. It was a production that famous actors like Judy Davis were in. And I was dropped off by Dr. Mark. I call him Dr. Mark, but he's in fact Leonis Petrauskas, another Lithuanian Nazi war criminal doctor. He dropped me off at the party. It was the night of my birthday, so I was turning 15 the next day, and I knocked on the door, and Bruce Spence, another offender, answered the door, and I was instructed to say, "Star Child is here." I went in and I saw all these. I'm not saying Judy Davis was there. I can't remember her being there, but it was a production she was in. But I remember a lot of others, and they were, snorting cocaine in the corner of the lounge room in the back sort of lounge area of the house. And, the back veranda overlooked a pool. And then after everybody left the party that night, I was sexually assaulted by Dr. Anthony Kidman and John Bell, the actor, famous Shakespearean actor over here. And then I saw them have sex with each other. They used me as a warm-up, and then we went out in the pool, and they did all this weird stuff in the pool, and they nearly drowned me, and I had Anthony Kidman had my arms behind my back at the pool while John Bell trod on my head and did this weird dance with some kind of weird mask on and was singing, and they were a little bit drunk and, whatever else they'd had. And then the next morning, the next memory I have is waking up and I was tied naked to a chair in some kind of, it looked like some kind of basement. It was sort of concrete-y walls and floor, and I was tied naked to a chair, and I was being smacked around the head by Anthony Kidman, and he was yelling, "Do you remember now?" And Nicole was, so she would, if I was 14, turning 15, she was about 16, turning 17. She was, I remember her hair being out, it was all curly, and she was just leaned up against the wall with her arms crossed, and she had this smirking look of contempt at me, in her face. And look, victims used to quite look out for each other within this world, but she was horrible. She was a bitch too, all of us. For some reason, she's not someone that we could ever have a conversation with or, depend on for empathy or comforting each other.
Here in America, Nicole Kidman is a loved actress. People really adore her. How come she hasn't come out and spoke out against this? Is she still? Do you think she's still involved? And does she head out to Bohemian Grove and bring kids with her?
Oh, look, I've not seen her involved in other than those incidents when I was a child, so I can't speak for what she's doing now. But I know that apart from the fact that when a well-known magazine over here, Woman's Day, a journalist, Jonica Bray, who's now Jonica Williams, came to interview me with a team of photographers and makeup and whatever, security guards were hired by Nicole Kidman to stalk me that day and follow me around, and they tailgated me and they nearly caused an accident, all this sort of stuff, and we got photos of them. And the journos went over and spoke to them, and they admitted that they'd been hired by Nicole because Nicole's security team had a leak. Nicole's security team were talking to a former member of Nicole's security team who's now paparazzi, and he was leaking to the media everything that was going on. So we knew it was Nicole, and I was told that Nicole was taking a Scientology approach to managing me.
Right, and we know she came over here and was involved in Scientology while she was here in America. Is Scientology somehow attached to all this too, or is that like total separate entity?
Absolutely. Scientology is just one branch, just one. So are the Freemasons. So is something called the OTO. So is, there's just a whole bunch of, Scientology had a recruitment, a youth group running in the Sutherland Shire in Sydney back in the 80s, and Hansard, New South Wales State Parliament record that. And Scientology definitely involved.
I remember when I was a kid, they had the book by L. Ron Hubbard. It would always be on the TV. Get the book by L. Ron Hubbard and learn the secrets of life and all that. How involved was L. Ron Hubbard in all this, being that he's basically the founder of Scientology?
Well, I thought he had something to do with Jack Parsons, didn't he, the Nazi rocket scientist? And they were all involved in, the stuff, Madame Blavatsky's writings and Aleister Crowley and all that sort of thing. So, people think I sit around and just study this all day. I don't. I just, I read a little bit of this and that and I move on because I don't need to research this. I've got my own head full of garbage that I saw myself. I've got my own movie in my head. So you're probably best to ask people like, my researchers. They all know all that sort of stuff, and they'll shoot me the odd email or a phone call and say, we found this link, we found that link. And the links they found are amazing. Like Anthony Kidman, he had a charm that he would use to sort of trigger unethical hypnosis, which is what they use as one of their methods. That plus drugs, plus torture, like, cattle prodding and whatever. And you can train any child to do as they're told if you do use those methods. And anyway, this particular emblem that he had on this charm was what they call the Eastern Star. So, and it's a famous symbol within the Order of the Eastern Star, which is a Freemason organisation. And, Anthony Kidman and the other guys, 4 others, they dressed in these robes, which are the same colours as appears on that star. And, Freemasons are very well connected to Anthony Kidman and the Catholic Church as well. The Catholic Church is just a pedo organisation. There's nothing else for it.
And we saw all the allegations back in the day about priests and altar boys and all that type of stuff. And a lot of boys were abused at this place as well by all kinds of folks. And you had brought to my attention one of the young men. At the time, he was a young man. Now he's our age, near 50 or 50 years old. His name is Gordon. And tell us a little bit about his story, because I hear he's trying to get some help. Maybe we can, drum up some support for him and get his possessions back.
Yeah, well, Gordon Myers, his name is one of the bravest people you could meet, and one of the most likeable fellows too. Gordon was just a little boy when he accidentally got involved in he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and what they used to do with boys, they could be 6, they could be 11, they could be 9 or whatever, but they would sometimes frame them, the police would, or they would, the boys would be, say, with some older boys who were breaking into a house or something like that, and all of them would get in trouble. And they would grab the little children, just little boys like Gordon Myers, and throw them in state care. And there, within state care, they'd be abused and prostituted out to the VIP pedo ring in Australia, or they'd be murdered. So Gordon, an additional feature to Gordon's story is he's Aboriginal Australian, and over here we refer to Aboriginal children who were taken from their parents as the stolen generation. So Gordon identifies as Indigenous Australian and a member of the stolen generation. And so Gordon's father was Aboriginal and his mother was Caucasian. And Gordon's also related, just some background, to a very famous country music star in Australia called Slim Dusty. And Gordon's uncle, Gordon Parsons, whom Gordon Myers was named after, he wrote the very famous song Pub With No Beer, and it's an absolute classic. Now, Gordon himself was a truck driver for many years, and he's a very respected truck driver, and he's spoken out against things like, truckies being pushed to use drugs on the road and this sort of thing, and he's really well respected within the industry. Well, a couple of years ago, he testified to the current Australian Federal Child Abuse Royal Commission, which is a little bit like when you have some kind of Senate or congressional inquiry. And
right.
So it's a big deal over here, and it's been going on since, 2013. I testified to it in 2013. So Gordon goes to testify. Well, Gordon's amazing because we already had a Child Abuse Royal Commission. It was into the state of New South Wales and Sydney, and the VIP Pedophile Ring down there. And Gordon and about 7 other blokes, they instigated the Wood Royal Commission. And these guys, a politician called Frank Arena, had the guts to get up under parliamentary privilege and say, look, there's a pedo ring and it's involving judges, lawyers, police, media moguls like Terry Packer, and our children's services, docs, the education department, and politicians. And she got up and said, look, these people are doing these dreadful things to kids. Well, she ended up losing a job over it all because what they managed to do was, although it instigated a Wood Royal Commission, Gordon and his mates didn't even get to testify. For example, Gordon turned up to the Wood Royal Commission to testify, and the New South Wales police met him at the door and said, you walked in there and you're dead. Gave him a death threat, and then they locked him up in prison for something he didn't do. And this is what they did to all the guys, so no one got to testify. But so Commissioner Wood, absolutely, that guy should be hung, drawn and quartered for what he did. He just lied and said that, the ring, which also abused me, not just Gordon, and was involved in ritual abuse and murder, said it didn't exist, and it was a figment of our imagination and all this sort of thing. And Commissioner Wood used as so-called evidence the False Memory Foundation people who are actually pedophiles and some just not even scientific studies. They used something that one of the members of the False Memory Foundation wrote. She wrote a book, and it's just ludicrous. And that was the so-called evidence that this stuff didn't happen. And they ignored, kids. There was a kindergarten and the Mr. Bubbles case, which also came under the Wood Royal Commission, and they just ignored all the evidence from all these many preschool children, and so it was a complete cover-up. So Gordon, basically, he and thousands of other boys in Sydney were taken to various boys' homes run either by the state, they were called training centres, like Darrick Training Centre, and they were like a juvenile detention centre, or Charlton Boys Home, which is run by the Church of England Anglican Church, things like that. And the boys were just absolutely, just the treatment they received is disgusting. For example, they were cutting boys' penises off, and they did that to Gordon, and they managed to stitch it on, and he's alive today, but he could never have sex or have kids, This is the sort of thing they did. And anyway, what they did was get these boys when they were 6 and they prostituted them to an area in Sydney called King's Cross. It's a very famous red light district, and there was some very famous sort of hotels around there, and there's a place called The Wall, and there were flowers, there was a florist and hairdressers and all these sorts of people. They were recruiting boys and getting them out of the boys' homes, and they're prostituting them to politicians like Bob Carr, who's a politician, Bob Hawke, who's a former Prime Minister. Paul Keating is someone that I personally witnessed. Robert Menzies is a famous, Prime Minister of Australia. So these sorts of people were, we've got Alan Jones, a famous radio announcer here. He's been named by many of them to me and to the Royal Commission. We've got Bernard King, who is, I think he was some sort of cook. We've got so many famous people over here. And, Molly Meldrum, a famous TV rock and roll presenter, very famous, has a lot to do with all the royal family. And, he's had various people on the show, and Elton John was over here, and he used to have boys prostituted to him. The list is phenomenal and endless, and I have had multiple people tell me. So these boys were, molested and raped, and some were murdered. So many have come forward to me because I dared to name names myself. And now Gordon, what's happened to him is, so he finally got before the current Royal Commission, and as a result he got repeatedly bashed and he had to go under witness protection. So the Royal Commission, Helen Milroy is an Indigenous psychiatrist, and she's wonderful. I've got no criticism of her. I have concerns about the other Royal Commission members though. Anyway, she organised for Gordon Myers to have a change of identity, but what they didn't do was give Gordon Myers reissue his truck licence in his new name, so he couldn't work. So then Paul Gordon had saved up all his life for a big rig, which is worth $500,000 Australian dollars, plus trailers which are worth $200,000, and because he'd saved up for this and was paying it off, well, because he couldn't work and he couldn't have anyone drive his truck, he couldn't get anyone to, he then couldn't meet the payments on the truck, and they repossessed it. So here he was, he'd worked all his life for this, and they took it off him. So that was a couple of years ago, and he nearly hanged himself over it, And I'm not happy about that. That's just unacceptable, and I'm campaigning for Gordon to get his truck back. So I've got a Facebook page called Give Gordon's Truck Back. You can go to my Facebook page, which links to it, which is just Fiona Barnett. There's another Facebook page called Pedophiles Down Under. It's pedophiles spelled P-E-D. And I also have a WordPress site with a lot of information on it and a bit about myself, which is called Pedophiles Down Under. But for some reason, Google don't like people to find that site, so you can get to it through Facebook even. But also, I've not stopped since I came out in the media about 6 weeks ago. It's gone crazy in my life, and I'm not keeping up with everything and with the phone calls, and I need to hire someone who'll work for nothing to answer my phone. So that's Gordon, and I'm trying to set up we had a phenomenal response. I only put the page up, and late one night, and by the next morning we had 2,000 posts and hundreds of likes, and so I'm really campaigning, and I'm going to approach the truck companies over here, like Kenworth Trucks and Packard, to distribute Kenworth, because I want to get him a new truck. I think that's fair. It's something we can do. People often say, "Oh, what can we do to help victims?" Well, this is something we can do. Paul Gordon's never been able to have a wife or kids, or and he's been thrown in prison continually for things he didn't do, and he's someone who is making a very sound contribution to Australian society, and the government's just betrayed him over and over and over. And you can see all the paperwork I put up on my Facebook site, all the documentation's there. He's given me someone gave me hundreds of papers, to support what he said, what his allegations are, and it's the largest amount of evidence we've ever seen. Advocacy groups are overwhelmed with the evidence. But that's what they did. And there's another guy, Carl Orm, and he is somebody who is a witness to what happened to Gordon Myers and the other boys. And so that So this morning I was very pleased to wake up, and there's good on Megan Palin, a Sydney journalist, who put up Gordon Myers' story on news.com.au. I'd like to congratulate that site, that I think the news organisation, because they're the first to break this story into mainstream media, this VIP pedophile ring, and they're just to be commended, because so many journalists were frightened to do it. So now the floodgates are open, and people are coming forward. So that's the story concerning Gordon Myers, and I want to urge people to help us get his truck back. I've been invited by the Indigenous population to down to what they call their tent embassy in Canberra in January, and I'll be, campaigning to get Gordon's truck back.
That would be great, because based on what he went through as a kid, he deserves to be able to support himself and make a living. A lot of stuff like that happens in America, where they're just railroading patriots and people who are trying to do the right thing in the name of justice, I guess. So now you were in this ring from a very early age, born into it, as you said, and I had seen you had drawn some pictures on your page that were kind of like little storyboards for what was going on, and one of the things that you had posted, I believe it was part 12 or part 13, depicted Richard Nixon. Now, what happened? And that was over here in California, at the Bohemian Grove, this secret place that these Illuminati, Freemasons, and all these folks attend every year. This took place over there. Now, explain what happened there.
Yeah, well, basically what happened was there's lots of different organisations linked to this pedophile child sex trafficking network. So one branch was the military, the Australian military. So there's a relationship, there was an agreement made between the Australian military and the American military and the CIA over there. And the CIA were involved in child trafficking, just as you've heard, they'd be involved in trafficking arms and drugs and all that sort of thing. They're involved in child sex trafficking. So, this is all it's all money to these people. It's just a way of making money, just as drugs and guns are. Anyway, I ended up coming into contact with various arms of this pedophile ring or network, and I was actually handed over as a government lab rat, basically, to John Gittinger, who was a CIA military psychologist, and he was a genius, an evil genius, and he tested me, and I was recruited in something called the Jason Project. Anyway, that Jason Project was sort of, their work was done at Pine Gap, which is a CIA USA military base in the middle of Australia, and it was done at Lucas Heights nuclear reactor, where they were manufacturing isotopes for use in their experiments. And next door to Lucas Heights reactor in Sydney, south of Sydney, is Holsworthy Army Base, which is our oldest army base. And they're linked to the Vietnam War and everything that happened over there. And you hear a lot about, all the sort of mind control and brainwashing experiments and things that were done over there in Vietnam. So this is all linked. Anyway, I was recruited as one of the children in Sydney that were, So, and I was handed over through Dr. Leonis Petraskas. So when my grandparents handed me over to the Engadine Boys Town Pedophile Ring, then Leonis Petraskas was in charge of that ring, and then he was friends with Anthony Kidman and went to uni with him, and they're linked, like Anthony Kidman's linked to the CIA, and so is Kim Beazley Sr., who was the Federal Education Minister, and he was the coordinator of international child sex trafficking in Australia. So all these guys are linked. So they did dreadful things to me at Holsworthy. And I was then prostituted to Canberra. So I was prostituted to when I was 5. It was at the end of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam's term, and I was prostitute. I was dressed up like Shirley Temple, and my code name was Candy Girl, and I was dropped off there. I was taken there by Gittinger, and I was dropped off and around the back, and I attended a pedophile party, an orgy at Parliamentary House, and there was there I was assaulted by the Prime Minister Gough Whitlam and John Kerr, who's the Governor General. Whitlam and Kerr were actual homosexual lovers. Well, look, these guys are into everything. Like, people think, oh, someone's gay, they couldn't like children, or someone likes children, they couldn't be gay, or someone's gay, they couldn't like women, or, nah. There's no such thing as, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, these guys are into anything. Animals, some of them, dead kids, whatever. Prime Minister Paul Keating was into dead boys, and he would pick up guys at gay hotels in Sydney, so strangers, so, Anyhow, so I was assaulted at this party, and there was Justice, what's his name, Lionel Murphy. Anyway, now while I was down there, that same trip in Canberra, I was taken to a backyard barbecue, and Bob Hawke raped me at a barbecue up in I remember it was in the zucchini patch, and he was drunk. Then I was taken, and I've got other people who've come forward about Bob Hawke. Heaps have come forward about Bob Hawke, including his architect's daughter. So Kevin Borland was his architect, and Kevin's got 3 daughters, and one of them came forward to me. And anyway, Bob Hawke assaulted her when she was 14 in her own bed after a party, woke her up and digitally penetrated her. So she's an excellent witness. Anyway, and her name's, all her stuff's gone to the police as well. Now, and then I was taken to, while in Canberra during that lovely trip, I was taken to Fairbairn Military Airport. And that's the place where if any overseas dignitaries, politicians, whatever, are flying in, presidents, they fly into there. So Air Force One will land at Fairbairn Military Airport in Canberra. So I was taken there by Gittinger, and there was a military plane, and from what I remember, it just looked plain. It wasn't marked with much that I noticed. It was just like a greeny grey colour or something, like a khaki or something. Anyway, and I was dressed as Candy Girl, and I was told, go up into that plane there. Gittinger said, walk into the back of that plane, there's a very special person there, and I want you to do whatever he says. So I just did what I was told, and I walked in the back of the plane, and there's a bed there, and it's President Richard Nixon. And he had an erection, and then he proceeded to violently, viciously rape me to the point where a military doctor had to stitch me up. So, and I was placed in anyway, it was horrible. So that was that. And then after that, not immediately after, but down the track, I was then trafficked from Sydney airport I was put in a crate like an animal and lightly gassed. And I was put in a cargo plane, and I was flown over to California, and then I was taken up to Bohemian Grove. Now, at Bohemian Grove, the first thing I saw was men. Now, everybody must know that Bohemian Grove is just a big pedophile, satanic ritual abuse orgy. That's all it is. It's a big party. You've seen footage by Alex Jones where they say, oh, it's just burning an effigy of a human to Moloch. Well, politicians, world leaders, dressing up in robes and pretending to sacrifice a human being to a statue of Moloch now, that's weird. That has to be questioned. And you've got evidence of that. You've got video evidence of that. So, but what I did was I was taken over there, and first thing I saw was a bunch of guys in like black Ku Klux Klan style robes, and they murdered someone. They had someone hung up, and they murdered someone. And then I remember a few other things. There was a teddy bear. We were dressed as teddy bears and put in the forest and in dark, and they did this hunting rape game, which they love. They love these hunting games, like Hunger Games. And us kids were dressed up. Well, they couldn't find me because I was really good at hiding. So they didn't find me for ages, but the other kids they found and raped. And they had, that music, if you go down in the woods today, da-da-da, and that the Teddy Bears Picnic music was playing on loudspeakers really creepily in the dark, and we were told, run and hide, And then the other thing I remember is being taken into a pink bubble room over there. And in the pink bubble room, it was all like pink bubbles, pink plush carpet, pink blow-up furniture, and I was dressed as Candy Girl and dressed in pink and like Shirley Temple and with, ribbons in the hair and all these patent sort of pink shoes and everything. And in there was none other than, your famous preacher, Billy Graham. And see, Billy Graham was very good friends with Richard Nixon. And anyway, he gave me a drink, a pink drink, and it made me, drowsy. And then obviously he likes to rape children when they're knocked out. So what he did say to me was, Richard told me, Richard's a good friend of mine, and he told me all about you, and you're a good girl, and you like to please men and all this sort of thing. And then he assaulted me. So that's Billy Graham, not a Christian, folks. And he's actually, as far as I know, he's very high up in Freemasonry, I've been told. But that's what happened to me. And then the next thing I remember is being at Disneyland. And see, Walt Disney was a pedo. And that's why people like Michael Jackson built Neverland and copied, the Disneyland theme park. And that's why people like Britney Spears and the Mouseketeers just went nuts. So I was taken to Disneyland, and it was terrible. I remember being drugged and hypnotised and assaulted, and they had what they do is close the park after dark and have pedophile parties there with all the elite, and I would be taken there, and Jane Fonda's ex-husband Ted, he was there. Anyway, I was spun in these things, and that thing, It's a Small World After All, played over and over, and I was, and put in that teacup and saucer ride until I vomited and I was drugged, and it was horrendous. And that's what I remember about my trip to Bohemian Grove. And I must say that in 2012, Kim Beazley Senior's, who I saw, rape and murder children, his son, and Bob Carr, who's been named by many victims of the Sydney Pedophile Ring, they both went over to Bohemian Grove representing Australia on Australian taxpayer dollars. So all they went to do over there was to rape and kill children, as far as I'm concerned, because that's all it was. It's a pedo playground. It's nothing more than that.
So did I hear correctly, you said Bob Hope?
No, I didn't say that. Well, other people have named Bob Hope. No, Jane Fonda was married to someone called, I think, Ted. He was a politician. He was at Disneyland that night.
Right. So you have Billy Graham and Richard Nixon. Well, we know what happened to Richard Nixon over here, but Billy Graham was held in such high esteem for so many years, and now his son is out there. He's fairly popular here in America. Is his son involved in this?
Oh, look, I've not personally witnessed his son being involved, so I can't speak to that. I only ever say, that's right, someone just said Jane Fonda's husband was Ted Turner, so Ted Turner was at Disneyland that time when I was molested.
Right, he's Turner Broadcasting here in America.
Oh, is he?
Turner Broadcasting. Those are some of the evilest people ever. Jane Fonda actually was responsible for American military soldiers being killed and tortured and beaten in Vietnam when she went to visit. And we call her Hanoi Jane over here. She's like a traitor, and most people can't stand her. And Ted Turner.
No, I'm not a fan either.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan either. Mm.
So that means you had named politicians, prime ministers, actors, and a president. All the folks that I had mentioned on our promo for the show. Do they allow regular citizens to participate in this? Is there like citizen night, or it's so secret that only the elitists can get in there? Because I guess I answer my own question is if regular citizens were able to be in part of this, the secret would never be able to be held this tightly for so long. But do they have like times for regular people, and would regular people participate in this? I'm just blown away by this. I can't believe that this actually happened. And this training facility was open for 31 years. It closed in 1991, apparently. But we get back to the original question: were regular citizens ever involved in this, or do regular citizens start at the bottom and work their way through the Mason Society and then be able to get involved? How does that work?
Okay, it's a hierarchy. If you picture a pyramid, up the top you've got your elite, your VIPs, okay, and they're people who are, we call them bloodline, okay. So these people there's a religion that underpins a lot of this. And not everyone's involved in that. I always said Gough Whitlam, I mean, I could be wrong, but my impression was, and from what I remember, Gough Whitlam was not involved in ritual abuse. He was just a pedophile. So, but then you've got people like Kim Beazley Sr., who's raised in it. And a lot of these people in politics in Australia and positions of leadership, they were the offspring of the Nazi war criminals that came over here, and they might change their names or anglicise their names, etc. So you've got what they're called bloodliners. So they're people who are born into it. And up the top, you've got people who are the bloodliners are usually high IQ, and they're called, the elite, the chosen ones, we were called. So, which, you don't want to be chosen for this, so don't anybody ever aspire to this garbage, because it's not, it's not worth it. But anyway, then what you have is some other groups, and some people might be multi-generational, but they're not considered the high IQ chosen ones, right? So, and then below that, you'll have people recruited through university, public and private schools, and then right at the bottom, you'll have your bikie gangs and people like that who get involved that way, and just your obvious people who get involved in local witches' covens and things like that. They think it's just a bit of a laugh. And then one day they get involved so far and they realise what's really going on, and it's too late, they can't get out. So you've got your mafia and all that sort of thing. The mafia are involved somewhere in that hierarchy in all these groups. Now, what people don't realise is if you come in and you're not bloodline, you can never make it to the top. You can only be born at the top. And that's where you hear that people like Bush and the royal family and, various politicians, they're all related. They're blood relatives. So, and then you've got, say, about 12, 13 bloodlines right at the top, and then you've got about 300 bloodlines below that. And the ones right at the top within the religious organisation are called, are sort of revered as demigods, okay? And then you've got about 300 family bloodlines, like, Gardner and Collins and all these other names. And then below that, it goes down the line. So, yes, look, so many people are involved. I would say now, in this day and age, because you've got to remember that this increases exponentially. When you abuse a child, then you think, these people think once they get a child in, and if they've got them for life, then they think they own that child's children and that child's grandchildren. So you think if you've got somebody, if they've come in the 1940s and then, we're up to the fourth generation, then all those, it's all spread, it's increased, it grows like a cancer. So we now definitely, I've seen that every organisation in Australia has been infiltrated. Politicians, the police, the education department. I mean, personally, I've seen evidence of infiltration. Docs, docs. Our children's services here is just, with the help of the judiciary, police, is just nothing more than a child prostitution racket. So it's everywhere. The little old lady next door, your bus driver, your doctors, your nurses, your hospitals. Look, I couldn't imagine that any psychiatric hospital hasn't been infiltrated, because they have to infiltrate these places and shut this down. This is how they keep it a secret. And you can have an organisation of, say, 20 people. It only takes one to have infiltrated to start exacting the will of the organisation as a whole. They'll say, look, I'll get that phone call for you, Bob. A case will come in related to, someone like me. And they'll say, I'll get that for you. You have the afternoon off, I'll take that. And, these sorts of things, that's what it takes. And it's so spread now that you can't even, look, the difference between Australia and America is, in America, you've always had two extremes. You've had very extreme sort of a moral movement, and a very strong Christian movement where people, it's not shameful over there in certain areas to walk down the street with your Bible and talk openly about God and biblical beliefs. But then the other extreme is the debauchery of Hollywood. And, people like, the makers of the Star Wars series who, John Collins / Todd said everyone in that movie had to sleep with the producers to get the part.
you've got the debauchery of Hollywood. And so you've got two extremes. In Australia, we've only got one. We've got one extreme, and it's this pedo stuff. This country is CIA run. They own this country, and they always have, and that's what Gough Whitlam found out when he tried to take them on. It's over here. It's very much a socialist country, and it's not a democracy, and it's not accepted here. Free speech is accepted here, and they already took our guns off us many years ago, and so Australia's always been a bit of a test run for anything they want to introduce anywhere else. It seems it's always happened here first. So yes, right. Everybody. Look. It's just this. It's too late. They've completely infiltrated Australian society. They have. So yes, anybody can get involved.
The next infiltration right now, and it's not only over there, it's everywhere. The infiltration that's coming now, and they're a bunch of pedophiles too, is the Islamist extremists. They are now making their push, and they're just as evil and dirty as these people. How's it going? How's it going in Australia with the Islamists?
That's not my area of expertise. So I'm a little bit, I'm not up on the research to do with what's happening and politically, especially the last 6 weeks, because I've been flat out with, since I appeared in Sydney at a press conference on the 22nd of October. And all I've been doing is I've been up all night talking to victims and all that sort of thing. So I'm really not familiar with what's happening, and I feel as though if I spoke about anything like that, I'm speaking outside of my area of expertise. There's other people who are better at that. But from my perspective, look, the only thing I've got to say is Australia let in a whole bunch, thousands of Nazi war criminals. They didn't vet who they let in. So my only concern with whoever you let into any country is vet them to see whether they're war criminals, And I suppose the other thing I've got to say is I don't give a stuff about somebody's cultural background. I don't care if you're gay or straight. I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home. So long as you're not hurting children and imposing your beliefs on anybody else and shutting down the truth and stopping other people from practicing what they believe in and speaking the truth. So I support victims from all different backgrounds, including, people whose religion is Muslim, Islam, and they've got my support if they need my support as victims of child abuse. So I don't discriminate on the basis of race, or religion or sexual preference.
Sexuality, right. And are there any hearings or testimonies that you'll be facing here in the near future? Do you have anything on the schedule that you'll be answering questions and giving testimony?
Well, I basically have given my stuff to the Sutherland police detectives. I did 2 days of witness statement making on the 2nd of December. They were supposed to get me in for a predicted 5 more days of witness statement making, how big it was. And they've not contacted me regarding getting me back in. But look, those 2 detectives they assigned to me are fantastic, especially the girl who I have regular contact with. Now, my concern for them is I know from past experience and from talking to other people and experts in this area, when a young, police officer takes up a cause and tries to do the right thing, if they push it too far, they will be thrown out of the police force. They will have their careers destroyed. Those families will be threatened, and they'll be threatened. So I went public in part because I got sick of it, sick of being quashed and no one doing anything, and a lot of victims not coming forward at that stage, who came forward to me privately. I really feel quite protective of those detectives, and I just went public because I went, I don't want it to fall upon them, this burden to rest with them, because there are very good cops out there. They're not all, complicit with this criminal activity. And, you know what I mean? And so I don't know what's happening with that, except that I get the odd email and I've asked for, been asked for information and they've interviewed people and all this sort of thing.
I don't. Look, I'm not I said to them, when they first phoned me up, I said, haven't they shut you down yet? Haven't they shut the investigation down yet? What we are campaigning for is for the old Wood Royal Commission material, which is the pedophile ring that abused me, the VIP ring, to be opened up. We need it to crack open. And we need the Royal Commission over here to extend their terms of reference to include the investigation of the New South Wales and other state police forces and their involvement in child sex trafficking, the involvement of the federal police, the involvement of the military, the involvement of the government, politicians, judges and lawyers, children's services, and hospitals and doctors and nurses and pharmacists and, these other people, okay? So that's what I'm campaigning for. And people... I don't know what people think of me, and I don't really care anymore. I've gone past caring anymore. To me, my priority is these boys from the Wood Royal Commission, because I feel what I've come to realise in the last few weeks is they all contact me and they're up at midnight and they're breaking down. These are hardened crims, some of these guys, really hardened crims. And they've never talked about. So I get phone calls saying, I've never spoken to anyone. My wife doesn't even know, this sort of thing. They're my priority. And I realise that, I might have had it bad, and if you read my stuff, you go, that doesn't get as bad as that. You know what? I now conclude that it's worse for Aussie blokes, because within our culture, it's not manly to even talk about being, sodomised as a kid or having a penis chopped off. Let's face it.
Right.
Australian blokes are very, very macho, sort of in a different way to, say, English guys or American guys, They're very... they're in a class of their own, and they are not allowed to express emotion. They're raised from a very, very young age to not even talk about it.
Right.
So I really feel for these guys in Sydney, especially for women.
I just need one second real fast. I need 1 second real fast. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having a very informative interview this evening with our guest, Fiona. This interview looks like it's going to run over a little bit, and to catch the rest of this interview, just head over to www.blogtalkradio.com/WINN later on, and it'll be up on the archives. The whole show complete will be on my pages, Mark Hoffman's Patriot Nation Radio and Patriot Nation Radio, both on Facebook, and of course my personal page, www.blogtalkradio.com/WINN. All right, I had to get that in there. And does this ring include judges, prosecutors, prison guards? I mean, how is this?
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere?
Yeah, the lot. Yeah, the lot. I'll give you an example. I worked as a parole officer for a while in New South Wales and Queensland Corrective Services, and my boss in Queensland Corrective Services when I got there, because I was very good at what I did, and I was very good at court report writing, and I was very good at court work and getting up and speaking when I was young. And anyway, this boss called me aside one day, we were down at some training do, and we're having a coffee, and she said, Fiona, if you play your cards right, you'll go far in management. And she said, have you seen my ring? And she showed me a ring, and it was the symbol. It was a ring with gemstones in it, and it was the same Eastern Star symbol that Anthony Kidman had in his charm that he wore around as a necklace. And, so she showed me, have you seen your ring? And no, I lied, And she said, there are 5 of us wearing a coven. This is my coven ring, and there are 5 of us. And every 2 years, no matter where we are around the world, the girls and I, we get together every 2 years. And one of those people was a ceramics lecturer from Queensland College of Art that I attended. So I knew this other person. And, and then this boss said, Fiona, you play your cards right and you go far in management. And I said, no. I said, I'm not management material. So, it is so wide-reaching. And because I think because I was bloodline membership, people can't believe that I got out. Victims, people like that boss from Corrective Services, I don't think they can ever believe I got out. And they just start talking to me like I'm still in it and making me offers and this sort of thing over the years. And, when I was at, say, Bond Uni, I was a student then. I was 2 subjects short of forensic psychology masters back in 2010, and you know, the lecturers in psychology faculty were involved. And when they realised I'm not playing their game and they're not going to get me back in as an abuser, you know, they just got rid of me. And my articles are on the Independent Australia. You can see what they did to me there, and it's well documented, and I've got lots of witnesses. So, yep. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, indeed. And excuse me. Is this ring still going on today, or has it been broken up? Did these guys scatter? Are they fearful now that the whistle's being blown and awareness is being brought to this ring?
The ring's very much alive, and it would be bigger and stronger than when I was a child. That's the evidence I'm getting from other victims who are coming forward. There's victims younger than me. There's parents of victims who have come forward. So, yeah, it's very much alive and well. And I think maybe they're getting nervous that, it's breaking in the press, and it broke today in the mainstream media, and there's been 2 articles that have broken in the press in the last week. I broke in the press, back in late October. There's a bit of a groundswell now, and I think if they, you wonder, are they going to shoot me? Are they going to try and do me for defamation? Are they going, people are throwing all this at me, and, well, I don't have anything to really sue me over. And, I mean, it's all true, Do they want to end up in court with all the witnesses we've got now to what's happened to me and others?
Right.
Do they want to go to court and go, oh, I'm not a pedophile? That's, and end up in mainstream media for having to get up in court and say, I'm not a pedophile. Are they going to try and shoot me? I mean, it's going to look obvious now if they, like Gordon Myers said yesterday, he said, geez, with all this media attention, he said, I think I'm safe, So, it's going to look obvious if they do away with one of us now. They might try and make an example out of one of us, well, this is what happens if any of you come forward. But you've got to, I suppose I got to the point where I really broke, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And I just went, I did. I physically, it's taking its toll on me, and, it's not great. And I got to the point where I was really pushed to my limits as a human being, and I just gave up, and that's why I posted all my stuff online and named names. I went, oh well, I'm going out with a bang, and the victims won't come forward. I've had a gutful. We had a press conference arranged with this other Bob Hawke victim, and she pulled out the last minute after I'd paid for my airfares and hotel accommodation, booked all the accommodation. And I just went, and she didn't want to come forward because she says, I'm going to lose my housing commission house, and my part-time job's government funded, so, I don't want... And she's strong enough to have come forward, and I just went, I'm jack of this. And so I threw all my stuff up, and I honest to goodness gave up, and, my little 11-year-old picked up on it, didn't just said out of the blue, you're right, Mum. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm right, as I'm driving to the dancing. She says, Mum, you've given up, haven't you? And, I hadn't told anyone in the world that I'd given up. I'd done it internally, and she said, you've given up, haven't you? And I just was blown away, and I said, yes, I have. And she started giving me a lecture on only weak people give up and that. And I said, well, no, strong people burn out, And I got out, and next minute I'd given up, and I'd given up inside, and I went, I'm not doing this anymore. And then Gordon Myers came forward to me, and I received, all his stuff, and I couldn't believe it. And then once Gordon came forward, all the others came forward, and they're just coming forward in a steady stream. And so, yeah.
Approximately how many folks have come forward now besides yourself?
From the VIP ring? Personally to me, and I'm dealing with them, 20 to 30.
Wow.
But yeah, and that's all different ages, and we've got Anthony Kibben victims have come forward, and young ones, old ones, of the same ring. But then others have come forward to Nikki Davis, who was the SNAP representative who flew me down to Sydney for the original press conference. I didn't even know them. I didn't even know who they were or anything. And they said, oh, will you come down and talk to the press? And I went, oh, okay. So, yeah, I think that's the main. And so, you know, a number of those I've been supporting very closely and speaking to over the phone and, you know, talking them out of, you know, necking themselves and, you know, this sort of stuff because, you know, the pressure's on. And, yeah, so I'm just trying to get the Royal Commission to make provision for these people, you know, just even to receive counselling. The Royal Commission hasn't even given these people counselling. You know, these people are in hiding. They can't just go to a counsellor and trust anyone because too many of the organisations are involved. Even the child advocacy groups, a lot of those are fake and they're actually collecting people's information and handing it over to the ring, and next thing these people are being beaten up or taken away and not seen of again, and, you know, this sort of thing.
Well, that's just unbelievable. Well, we're right here at the end of the show. We ran over. That's always fun. I mean, that means the interview was really good. And I would love it if you could keep in touch with me and maybe come on again in the near future for an update and let us know what's going on with some of these cases and if Gordon got his truck back. And if there's a way you could give the information, the pages back to maybe help Gordon get his truck back. And, you know, whatever we can do. The guy needs to get to work.
Yeah, look,
you know.
I think also the reason why I'm really behind Gordon, not just because of a wonderful human being, but he was one of the ones that was considered someone who looked after the other victims when he was young. And some of the boys were older than him, but Gordon defended them, you know. And he's a real leader, and he's an extremely intelligent boy, very intelligent guy. And you know, getting Gordon's truck back is also symbolic of, you know, trying to give something back to these victims. I mean, they nicked everything off these boys, and a lot, you got to remember, most of them are dead. Most of the victims are dead. The vast majority are dead. They didn't make it. They were either murdered or they committed suicide or they were suicided or they were overdosed or they did overdose on heroin or whatever. And, you know, or they're in mental institutions, you know, babbling like a baby. So, if you go to Facebook page, Give Gordon's Truck Back, I haven't got it up yet because we've got to get a separate account organised, but I'm going to do a crowd fund for Gordon. I'm going to try and raise at least $500,000 to get his truck back, and his truck's worth $500,000. Trailer's worth $200,000. I mean, we're going to do what we can, and we try and get Kenworth trucks on board because that's his favourite brand of truck.
Right. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. And please, like I said, keep in touch, and we'll do an update show here in the near future, in like a month or so, and see what's going on and see how you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And thanks to the listeners and their support and sending me so many messages of support. So go to Pedophiles Down Under WordPress or Pedophiles Down Under Facebook page or Fiona Barnett Facebook. And I'm on Twitter at Fiona Ray Barnett. So just spread the word. The best thing people can do is spread this via social media. Spread it everywhere. It keeps victims like me and Gordon safe.
And it might encourage your bravery, the bravery of you and Gordon, to come up and the other 20, 30 people to come out and speak up is commendable, because what you guys went through was very traumatizing, I'm sure. And you must have nightmares to this day. I couldn't imagine where you wouldn't be having nightmares, especially Richard Nixon. He was an ugly man. That must be one hell of a nightmare, reliving that. Trying to relive
they're
that,
all ugly. Know? They're all ugly men. They're all ugly men.
Yeah.
They're ugly on this side.
Yeah. And I commend you for being able to pull yourself up and try to live as normal a life as you can after the things that you've been through. It's very inspiring, your strength. And I hope that a lot of people out there who maybe not be in this VIP pedophile ring and pedophiles down under, but they just may be in a home where there's abuse, and maybe they're hearing this story, or whatever the case may be, will bring them to come forward and show some bravery and stop some other sick individuals from doing the same thing. Because the future of our world is our youth, and if our youth's minds are destroyed by sick pedophiles, what use are the children going to be when they become adults, besides criminals and drug abusers, a lot of them? And your story is very, very intriguing and inspiring, because you pulled through and you're living a life, you're married with a family, and I ask God to bless you and your family. And
Thank you.
Your strength is amazing. Your strength is so amazing. Thank you, and God bless. Okay, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to say to victims, look, No one is ever pushed beyond what they can endure. And when they're tested, even though it feels like it, they will always be provided with a means of escape. Suicide's not an option. You'll never be pushed beyond what you can endure. And I know because I've been pushed right to the edge.
Amen. And again, I want to thank you so much, and please keep me updated, and we'll do a show again. God bless.
Thank you. Good night.
And I hope your Christmas is merry and filled with joy this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, that there was one heck of a story. Fiona Barnett just told her story live. And the tentacles of this pedophile ring run really deep. They are wrapped around the whole country of Australia like Medusa's head of hair snakes. Just they are entwined in every aspect. Judges, police, clergy, politicians, prime ministers, presidents, military. Unbelievable. This is happening still to this day. They have this place, Bohemian Grove, in California, where these things are taking place. High-profile VIP people hurting, raping, dismembering, mutilating children, killing them, burning them, hanging them from trees, hunting them in the woods. Children. Little children. Our guest tonight was 5 years old when she was attacked by President Richard Nixon, allegedly. I wasn't there. She was there. Believe it or don't believe it. I, myself, believe what I heard tonight. And remember this, folks, the views and opinions expressed on tonight's show are not necessarily those views and opinions of World Integrity News Network or its affiliates or its partners. And I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight, as this was a very charged episode, one that ran and implicated many people. Billy Graham, Richard Nixon, and many others. Nicole Kidman, Kidman's father, Anthony Kidman. Scientology, the connection with them and Freemasons, the Illuminati, and Bohemian Grove.